In 1934, a graduate student named Frank Hibben, a shining star in the archaeology program at the nearby University of New Mexico, excavated a cave in the Sandia Mountains of New Mexico, now known as the Sandia Cave, and discovered that it contained artifacts from as far back as the Folsom culture, and in 1934, they were considered the earliest inhabitants of the Americas. When the discovery was reported in a May 1940 issue of Time magazine, Hibben, by then a full professor, was hailed as a revolutionary figure, and the University of New Mexico became world-renowned for its archaeological and anthropology programs. Hibben's discovery of what was once described as the oldest human culture in the New World, along with a new type of single-shoulder projectile point, raised extreme controversy in the years that followed among the archaeological community, and his discovery ignited what has become the most controversial archaeological excavation ever done in the United States. Frank made his discovery during the excavation of Sandia Cave in central New Mexico from 1934 to 1939. His discovery produced carbon dates from the lowest occupation level that dated to sometime between 17,000 and 20,000 years ago. This discovery at the time, and the evidence surrounding it, would establish his career and bring to light the existence of Sandia Man as the earliest human in North America. At that time, the key to any archaeological site lay in stratigraphy. Stratigraphy is the study of the layers or strata of sediment, soils, and material culture found at an archaeological site. This method helps archaeologists understand the chronological sequence of human activities by analyzing the relationship between different layers of soil and artifacts. After years of excavation, Hibben reported that the stratigraphy of Sandia Cave have proved outstanding, and how he found a layer in the cave floor which, by a terrific stroke of luck, had entombed the lower layer. Underneath the crust, they found artifacts mingled with the bones of extinct animals like mastodon. He recounted that these artifacts belonged to the Folsom people, who thrived in the Southwest perhaps 10,000 years ago and hunted bison with a spear point that had a unique fluted shape. But Hibben and his colleagues kept digging below the layer. Below the Folsom level, they struck a smooth layer of yellow ochre, devoid of artifacts. What lay beneath this ochre layer was fabulous, the remains of an entirely unknown culture thousands of years older than Folsom. Hibben theorized that the Sandia Cave people, as he named them, lived at least 25,000 years ago and were big game hunters. The University of New Mexico, which was already respected for its archaeological work, became renowned, and Hibben himself became one of the country's most celebrated archaeologists. The projectile point type that was recovered was named after the type site, Sandia Cave, situated at the north end of the Sandia Mountains near Albuquerque, New Mexico. 13 Sandia points were all found during the excavation of Sandia Cave. 7 of these points have contracting stems that come to a rounded point. They are designated as Type 1 Sandia points. The other 6 points have a truncated base, some of which are either slightly concave or almost straight. 1 or more of these points may also be described as fluted. The truncated base points are designated Type 2 Sandia points. The last type Sandia point was similar to the Type 1 and Type 2 Sandia points, but was fully fluted at its base, and suggests that this was done for hafting to a spear shaft and hunted with. These 3 different types of projectile points and the actual Sandia Cave site have caused controversy since they were first discovered and named. The first problems arose with the radiocarbon dating of the overall site. Problems included an ivory piece and a mastodon tooth that the lab tasked with analyzing it questioned if the ivory piece had even come from the Sandia Cave site. Hibben later admitted that the wrong samples had been sent to be analyzed. The samples were to be sent to a research lab for further analysis by Kent Bryant. But Bryant, when questioned about the authenticity of the ivory and mastodon tooth samples, made no mention of sending the samples at all, and the lab had no records of samples sent or received by Bryant. In some way, shape, or form, significant archaeological findings, the ivory and mastodon tooth were sent, weren't sent, were never received. Who knows? But radiocarbon dates were reported on behalf of Hibben. Hibben wrote in his findings that all Sandia points that were recovered were at levels below a yellow ochre level. The yellow ochre was radiocarbon dated, and a return date of 300,000 years old, which questions how samples from the Sandia level provides dates of 15 to 20,000, while levels above the Sandia level provide dates of 300,000. There were also questions on the fact that the 19 Sandia points, some sources claim 13, as I stated earlier, and some claim 19 and any number in between. Regardless, the points that were recovered were all intact, and there was essentially a lack of broken examples at the site, which is very uncommon in archaeological sites. Most points recovered are extremely damaged or broken altogether. Further analysis of the points revealed that many of the points lacked wear, as if protected at the site or somewhat new, while other examples were well weathered, as if they had been exposed to blowing sand and the elements. Another thing noted as strange is the radically different flintknapping techniques. Some of the Sandia point examples were manufactured with fine pressure flaking, while others were produced with percussion flaking, with many different types of stone material being used. Additionally, a handful, less than 10 removal flakes from pressure flaking were found in Sandia Cave, which is a bit odd for an archaeological site, when mostly hundreds upon hundreds of removal flakes are recovered at different long-term paleo caves and campsites. This led to the belief that the projectile point samples were made by different makers. And this can be practical, as ancient knappers likely had their preferences of stone and technique, but there would be many commonalities among the points. But what is most interesting is that 2 Sandia projectile points were analyzed and showed a modern alteration. One of them had a shoulder that was made with a grinding wheel, and the other showed detected metal marks suggesting that a nail might have been used to remove some of the flakes. For me personally, this does raise some scrutiny, as abrading stone and grinding stone is very common. Sandstone hard cobbles can produce a grinded base or an edge. Unless there was something about a specific material collected on the identified projectile points that showed a modern grinding material, it really holds no weight. However, the metal marks, well, you all know my thoughts on using modern tools to make ancient tools. Further complicating the issues around Sandia Cave is that there is only one other site in which Sandia-type projectile points have been recovered. That's the Lucy site in New Mexico, which was an open site that was subject to a lot of aeolian deflation, or the process of erosion, transport, and depositing of sediments that are caused by wind at or near the surface. This aeolian process produced a mixed assemblage of points that included Clovis, Folsom, Sandia, and other archaic-type points. Excavations were conducted there in the summer of 1954 as part of the University of New Mexico field sessions directed by Frank Hibben. But by the mid-1960s, other scholars began to levy disturbing allegations against Hibben and his discoveries at the cave. Decades of academic finger-pointing in various journals finally reached the public consensus in 1995 when journalist and fiction author Douglas Preston published a damning article in the pages of The New Yorker titled "The Mystery of Sandia Cave." This is the best source to find all the people involved and their comments along with references to scientific reports. After 1995, archaeologists who later visited the Sandia Cave site cast doubt on Hibben's assertions that the artifacts were found beneath an unbroken ochre crust. Researchers who had worked the samples from the site pointed inconsistencies in the samples, makeup, and most disturbingly, suggested that the iconic Sandia point, a unique slope-shouldered flint spearhead unique to Sandia man, may have been planted in the cave by Hibben himself. However, according to online sources, Sandia points have also been found in New Mexico, Central Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Alabama, and Alberta and Saskatchewan, Canada. Now, after countless hours behind a computer searching for any example of a Sandia point in any other location aside from the Sandia Cave or the Lucy site, I came up with very little about the points recovered outside of New Mexico. I found some online auctions from Oklahoma and New Mexico selling Sandia points for a pretty penny. Online blogs talking about the points, but still referencing Sandia Cave as its source, and a virtual museum talking about lanceolate points with sloping shoulders that could somewhat resemble a Sandia point. I looked for any variation of either type 1, 2, or 3 Sandia points, consistent with the examples from Sandia Cave, and I could not find anything specifying a point recovery location or anything that led me to believe there's been points recovered outside of Sandia Cave and the Lucy site. I thought it would be easy searching for terms like Sandia Point, Texas, Sandia Point, Canada. Single shoulder projectile point, fluted single shoulder projectile point. Single shouldered lancelet concave based approximately 2.5 inches long projectile point. Still nothing. Projectilepoints.net was the only website that had anything with Sandia points and identified different recovery locations, but was a single source of information with nothing that painted a clear picture, and regardless of what state you search in projectilepoints.net, it was all leading to the same page again and again that supplied less than conclusive information. When referencing the Overstreet Manual, the stone tool Bible, if you will, of all recovered and recorded stone tools in North America, on page 1005, it gives a couple examples of Sandia points and a bit of word magic. It then gives the example and description of the Sandia Type 4, a provisional or temporary for the time being. Notes on Sandia Points by Calvin D. Howard, pages 535 to 538, published online 16 November 2017. In recent years, several archaeologists have suggested that Sandia points be reclassified as specialized knives. Specific technological attributes are identified which support the reclassification of these artifacts as specialized tools or knives, rather than projectile points. It is also suggested that the difference in the basal design features of Type 1 and 2 Sandia points is the result of hafting method selection rather than technological chronology. With so many Paleolithic lancelet-style projectile points in existence, I guess there could be some misidentification when a worn-out or work point is labeled as Sandia point. When I was researching, I found a small collection of projectile points found on traditional Nez Perce land, dated to be the oldest stone projectile points in North America, around 18,000 to 20,000 years ago, and some of the collection and finds look like Type 1 Sandia points. I have no doubt that the Sandia point Type 1, 2, or 3 exists in some form or fashion outside of New Mexico, but who knows if some clearly identified site will be located and reported on. Not just a point, but a site with all the material culture that will allow archaeologists to draw the necessary conclusions based on the evidence recovered. Until that happens, I'll just keep napping points as I normally do, and try to stick them in a wild hog with an atlatl. I like it. This would be a Sandia Type 1, single shoulder, rounded base, pointed tip, lancelet style. I mean, I could see this definitely hafted on some sort of atlatl dart, thrusting spear. However, just looking at its profile, I feel like I'm kind of in agreement with that one article that this was probably some sort of specialized knife. I even think with this little single shoulder, if I had to, I could drop that in some sort of bone, antler, wood handle, pitch it up, wrap it up with sinew, and I would have a pretty effective specialized knife. It makes sense from an easy hafting point. It's not hard to make a lancelet style, and I drop this base area and kind of bring it to a point and then take out a shoulder. Even if you were to throw a flute in there, those flutes aren't full channel flutes running all the way up to the tip. Put something nice and thin on there, pitch it, bind it up, and you've got your knife. You know, what is the origin story? Somebody out there was making this style of projectile point or even knife blade, but it does exist. The hard thing is finding locations outside of New Mexico where you actually find a site, a cave site, a campsite, a butchering site where you find Sandia knives. You know, as far as the Sandia cave, there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of scrutiny into Frank Hibben and the projectile points and the ochre level, a lot of different things. I'm not saying that archaeologists get it right 100% of the time, but it's hard to believe that somebody would try to falsify information. Many of the archaeologists I know don't think like that, don't act like that. They're kind of just searching for the truth, trying to answer some long-standing questions, maybe paint a picture into the future. Hope you enjoyed. That is the Sandia projectile point. In my opinion, a specialized Sandia knife. I'll throw this one up on the website. First come, first serve. You can turn it into your own projectile point or make it into a knife. But there you go, the Sandia point. Thanks for watching.